Hi, everybody. Welcome to the part two of Ask Me Anything with Brian Levant, Hollywood director, writer, and producer. We're just going to take a couple minutes to let everybody file in, and then we'll get started. Thanks. My name is Nicole. I'm your host for today's Ask Me Anything. I am also the community manager at Celtx. So if you've reached out to us through our social channels, it's likely that you were speaking with me. So it's nice to see you all here today. We also have Chelsea, Marcel, and Laura, who are members of our customer support team, who are going to be helping monitor the chat and the QA for us today. And last but not least, our very honored guest, Brian Levant. Brian has been at the creative helm of some of the biggest franchises in family entertainment. Brian's more than 400 television credits include being the showrunner of Happy Days, Mork and Mindy, The Bad News Bears, and so many more. Among Brian's feature directing credits are the original Beethoven series, the two Steven Spielberg produced Flintstones films, our personal favorite, Jingle All the Way, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Snow Dogs, Are We There Yet? And the 2010 Jackie Chan vehicle, The Spy Next Door. Brian is also nationally recognized as being a toy and pop culture collector, and he is the author and designer of My Life and Toys, which is an upcoming book of his collection. You can actually see the front page of that book in the background of Brian's screen today. Welcome, Brian. Thanks so much for joining us.
Why, hi. Can you see me? I can't see you. I can't see me. So it's hard to know. Am I framed well? I can't see me.
You look great. I can see you perfectly.
Okay, I'm framed well. You got a head to... okay, I can't see. I usually can see. So thank you for having me again. Celtx has been tremendously supportive of my work with my classes at the University of Arizona and the University of New Mexico. And I am happy to do anything I can to help them in return. And I will preface this session the same way I did our first one like this, by saying that you can ask me anything. It doesn't mean I know the answers.
That's great. Thanks so much, Brian. So before we get started in on our questions, I'm going to show your wonderful, incredible reel, and then we can get started.
A reel. Here we go.
Ah, what a good reel.
I know.
Fantastic. Well,
So what do you want to talk about today? Writing, maybe?
oh, I think we'll talk a little bit about writing. We'll talk a little bit about directing. We'll talk a little bit about producing and the industry and all sorts of great stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to dive right in and start asking you some questions. And I thought that asking you about yourself and a little bit about your career would be a good place to start. First question up, how did you begin your career in the industry, Brian?
I think my career began, in essence, very, very early. I was fortunate to be part of the original baby boomers, and I came into the world the same time as television became the dominant medium in the United States and soon to the rest of the world. And in 1947, an NBC executive's wife begged him to put on a show that the kids could watch while she made dinner. And thus was born children's television with Howdy Doody, originally called Puppet Playhouse. And I was addicted to this show. In my baby book, it says my first sentence was a mangling of their opening, "Say, kids, what time is it?" If that gives you any idea. And I didn't realize, that every night I was getting a clinic in comedy from the giants of the 20th century, the early 20th century, Groucho Marx, Bob Hope, Jack Benny, George Burns. These people had weekly television shows, Jackie Gleason, giant comedic talents who were also dominating movie comedies as well at the time. And out of that, I became an ardent viewer and really engaged in it. And it led me to become a little boy who liked to make up stories. And the little boy who liked to make up stories and imitate cartoon voices soon was writing sketches for his Cub Scout den and submitting jokes in third grade to local kids shows. None were ever used, by the way. And along this time, a couple things happened. Number one, my grandmother in Miami Beach, where we visit, we spent a lot of time with her upstairs neighbor, a woman named Mrs. Bernice Alpert. And what was unusual about her was that she grew up on a farm outside of Elmira, New York. And every summer, a family from Missouri would come and rent the house next door. And she was best friends for most of her life with this little girl who was Samuel Clemens, or as you better know him by his pen name, Mark Twain. And she had untold things that from the family, books he published just for kids, all autographed, first editions, beautiful. And somehow in a 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon sense, the fact that I could stare through the glass at and be literally 2 steps from one of the greatest writers who ever walked the earth, whose work I had started with Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, were required reading. And I read it a couple times. And somehow it made it feasible to aspire to be a writer. And I always wrote for Sunday school papers. I was the editor of my camp newspaper. I was the editor of the Wednesday Totem Pole. Scott Simon of NPR was the editor of the Sunday Totem Pole. The guy who was editor when I first started ended up winning a Pulitzer Prize as a managing editor of the Philadelphia News and the Atlanta Journal Constitution. This was not play. These were people who really wanted to be writers and journalists. And I started making movies when I was 10, when Super 8 film became available as a cartridge that you could just stick in a camera and shoot. What a wondrous thing. Take it to the drugstore. A week later, you got your film. And believe me, this was a much better system for me. It was technically inept, and I could never load a 16mm Bolex. I lost a film and a half in college just because I couldn't load these stupid things in the dark like you were required to. But to get back to it, I had a TV show in high school. I patched together. I wasn't going to USC or UCLA or NYU or Columbia, not with my high school grades. And I patched together a pretty good film education at the University of New Mexico, the University of Arizona, 2 years of summer school at the Art Institute of Chicago, and a semester at Arizona, where I now, strangely enough, teach. And so I had my eye on this for a long time. The other thing that happened, around the time I was 8 years old, was the Dick Van Dyke Show came on the air. The Dick Van Dyke Show was created by Carl Reiner, who was an actor and writer on the greatest collection of comedy writing talent ever, Sid Caesar's Your Show a Show. The writing staff included not just the great Carl Reiner, but Woody Allen, Mel Tolkien, who was the executive producer, All in the Family for 13 years. You had Mel Brooks. You had Louise Calhern, who was the model, the only female comedy writer around, and she was the model for Rosemarie's character on the Dick Van Dyke Show. And also Larry Gelbart, the creator of the TV version of MASH, and the writer of Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. And so he and this is something I teach in my autobiographical sitcom classes, that Carl Reiner said to himself when the shows went off the air, he was getting all kinds of rotten scripts, right? And Carl Reiner, his wife said, well, why don't you write your own? He said, I don't know how to do this. And she said, oh, just try it. And he sat there and he said, he thought to himself, and this is very important, what piece of ground do I alone stand on? What makes me unique? And it was the fact that he had a family life in the suburb of New Rochelle, where the Petries lived on Dick Van Dyke. And he went into work in the city and worked on a variety show for an insane owner, host of the show, and producers who drove him crazy. But I saw a job where you came in and you put your feet up and you tried to crack wise and you threw darts and you had fun. And I said, that's the way I want to spend my life. Little did I know it would mean years and years of never being in rooms without windows or proper ventilation, and eating for years and years out of styrofoam, 2 or 3 meals a day, and everything else that it did you. But I was right. I recognized something, that this was work, but this was work exercising the fun in your brain. And so I pursued a very independent course in film education. I had a couple of wonderful teachers on the way, but I made it a point in classes and on my own to see and watch and analyze as many films as I could. And I think what's kind of lacking today, and I've been, I spend a lot of time on campuses, and I ask a litmus test question of film students. Said, how many of you know who Robert Altman is? How many of you have ever seen a film that he directed? And the answer is usually 1 or 2. And I think if I said the same thing about John Ford or Preston Sturges, or hopefully not Chaplin or Billy Wilder, I might get the same response. And that's a shame, because, unless you know good, unless you know great, how do you know what to aspire to? And by the same time, Gary Marshall always used to say, sometimes seeing bad is good because you learn from that too. But I watched with utter devotion, and for instance, my father thought I was going to be a massive failure. He really did. Once he walked into a room where I had taken 2 TVs and put them together in college, so I could be more conscious of how editing took place, which probably a stupid thing to do, but it just shows the extent. And he walked in and he was disappointed, like, beyond belief, and just shook his head and closed the door, you know. But I learned from that, and I armed myself with as much knowledge as I could to try and crash Hollywood when I was 22 years old. And I didn't know how, I never appreciated how tough a challenge that was. I was so ungodly determined that nothing was going to deter me. and I think that that's a key ingredient, is hunger and showing people that you want it and that you will deliver when asked. And I think that was key to my ascension, is that I answered the bell every day and other people didn't. And I tried harder and I worked harder. And you know, people take notice of that. And I actually was lecturing my Arizona class the other day because they were getting a little lax about turning in work on schedule. And to be a professional, you don't do that. It's really important. And so I'm sure there are many people who didn't get as far as I did, but they maybe didn't have the hustle, the desire, and the ability to show it, and then to deliver. I mean, I've worked with some incredibly talented people, and I certainly don't consider myself among them. But writing is a craft. And as my friend Leonard Ripp says, it's a craft that can be learned. And I had very good instructors. I was very fortunate to be taken under the wing of Gary Marshall and his organization. Gary, at the time, Happy Days was in its 4th season. I sold them a story, and I sold, and that was the 3rd story I'd sold, but no one would let me go on to first draft. They didn't trust me, you know, and looking at me at 22, 23, you know, with hair down to my shoulders and a glazed look in my eye. They probably were right, but they finally did trust me with the first draft, and it was awful. It's not that I thought it was awful. It's not, yeah, now I know it was awful. And they called me up and said, thanks, we're cutting you off. Gary Marshall was curious because he had taken an interest, because someone took me to his house to play basketball. And I guarded him, and I guarded him hard. And I blocked a couple shots. And he said, so what do you do after the game? And he gave me a story. Anyways, so he asked to read it. And he said he saw promise, but I needed seasoning. And they invited me to come in the week they did the episode that I had done the story for, and got credit for the script, even though I had nothing to do with it. And I watched what they did and how they did it, and the care that was put into every word, every piece of punctuation, how every aspect contributed to the story, how scenes were not just, they were already constructed. Now, how do you sharpen them? How do you push from scene to scene? How do you build to a good act break? What is the audience looking for, and how do we satisfy that? And the next year they invited me back to pitch again. I sold them the first story I pitched, and I turned in the script, and they said they offered me a staff job, $200 a week. And then, like I said, I was showing up. I was coming in early. I was doing extra work, and one guy had a drug habit, and he wasn't showing up. And they threw him out, and they bumped me to $300 and made me a story editor with my friend Fred Fox Jr. But you know, that year I did 27 episodes of Happy Days, and then I did 24 episodes of Please Stand By, a crazy show that was shot 2 in a week. So in a year, I did almost 50 episodes of TV, and by the time that was over, I was a veteran. I was a cold, hardened, cynical veteran. And as I grew, my ideas were getting bigger than my canvas. Doing live audience shows, you know, you were very limited in what you could do. Much freer doing shows like the Bad News Bears, which was a single camera show and made like a movie and outdoors and with Jack Warden and young Corey Feldman and that sated that. And I did one of the other things that happened in the 50s was Leave It to Beaver and the Flintstones came on in 1957 and 1960 respectively. And those are shows I watched the premiere of and that I would spend years of my life pursuing, making, thinking about, and living in the wake of. So you can see the elements that forge the career, and the stamp that I put on my work is very much influenced by the work that I grew up with, that I aimed like Jack Benny, like Dick Van Dyke, like Andy Griffith, which was produced by Leave It to Beaver Offspring and written by that you wanted to play to the widest audience. And the widest audience is mom, dad, teenage brother and sister, and the kids and the little ones. And to do that kind of entertainment. That's not for everybody. People know what they're interested in, who they want to reach. That was my influence, and I've always enjoyed it. And when I've gone outside of my comfort zone, so to speak, I have not been as successful at all, and certainly from a level of satisfaction and a good fit. So did that answer that question?
Yeah,
that was time to go now. Okay.
Yeah, we're deep into it now. But yeah, I love that. Thanks so much for that overview of your career. And along with it being very inspiring, I can see how you built your career has really influenced how you advise others and how you teach others to do what has gotten you to this point. So it all makes perfect sense to me. And after talking to you for, a number of hours about these kinds of questions and about your career, it would 100% make sense. And it is reflected in everything you have done and probably will continue to do. So I'm really excited to.
My work in education is really about filling in the knowledge that I'd wished I had before I tried to breach that wall that separates the student filmmaker from the professional. And already a number of my students are showing up in LA and seeing what they can do. And I'm very happy to see that.
Absolutely. That must be so cool to see, to watch your students now taking a part in the industry. Very, very cool. Okay. So on to the next question. I know we talked a little bit about, you getting into writing and you getting into filmmaking. But, are there any scripts that you've ever written that have never come to fruition? Are there some hidden Brian Levant scripts?
Oh, no, there's a trunk full of them. If anyone was interested in them, they would have been made. Sometimes it really hurts. I wrote a semi-autobiographical film called I Raised a Teenager that was sold to a very prominent production company for more money than I'd ever made as a writer. And they weren't doing it to make it. They just wanted to kind of take it off the market. So somebody else didn't do it, but they really weren't interested. So, and there's a lot of pilots. And I tried my hand, as I said, at things other than family comedy. I, for instance, at one point was to be the writer and director of Friday Night Lights, and spent time in Odessa, Texas, meeting the real life people that the movie would be based on, from Buzz Bissinger's incredible chronicle of a football team and race relations in Odessa, Texas, now almost 30 years ago. And it wasn't who I was, even though I was a football player and I loved that part of it. It just didn't feel right. And then it didn't feel right when I did things like I did a commercial in my life. They flew me to Milan And I made a commercial with an Italian crew, and very few people spoke English, and I certainly was lost and disenchanted with the whole process. Not that it's not a great way to make a living. If you want to do that, I didn't know why I was doing it. I wasn't telling a story. It didn't mean anything to me. I wasn't trying to do something great. Like when you read a script and you see something and you visualize it, and you visualize what it can be, and you work doggedly towards that end, no matter what it takes. And there was no passion, there was no drive, there was no genuine purpose other than the fact that they sprayed me with money, which I felt terrible about. I know, yeah, I really shouldn't. But you got to know who you are. And often I when I speak at schools, people say, well, how do I sell myself? I say, well, what do you write? And they go, well, I write drama, I do comedy, I do horror. Ho. How is somebody going to, you say one thing. Say, well, all right, I'm a drama, I'm a comedy writer, I'm a horror writer. And so people know how to sell you, and where you fit in. And then you can move around if you're having success. I think great examples of that are people like Robert Zemeckis, who started pure comedy and moved on to things like Forrest Gump. Rob Reiner, who also wrote the pilot for Happy Days, talking about families and comedy, and the son of Carl Reiner, the creator of the Dick Van Dyke Show. His first film was Spinal Tap. And he did When Harry Met Sally, and then all of a sudden he was doing Stephen King movies with Misery, and now things like biographies of President Lyndon Johnson in Crisis, and Will Ferrell's partner Adam McKay, who's doing Talladega Nights, and then is doing The Wolf of Wall Street or whatever. No, that was Crusade, but doing very serious work that gets Oscar consideration. Once you have power and strength, then you can move in different ways. Every attempt I did, and I tried to do several independent comedies, and it was like I kept writing scripts for companies that would then go out of business because it's such a labile community, and these people, their funding is built on good wishes often. So what next? What's next?
Yeah, so now that we've talked,
I'll be Sheldon Leonard.
Okay, one more question about your career before we move on to some questions about process. Yes. Out of everything that we've just talked about, all of the incredible opportunities and jobs you've had at the industry, is there any that you found the most rewarding?
Actually, there is. I'm very fond of the editing process because finally you're alone and no one's asking you 7,000 questions a day. No one expects anything from you for a contractual amount of weeks. So that's always very nice. But truly, I have found storyboarding, something that did not exist in my TV career. There's no need for, Fonzie and Richie sit in a booth. Well, you're not going to afford that, are you? But for the past 25 years, I have worked with a man named Daryl Henley, and I've never worked closer or more intimately, really, with anyone. And when I was in college, I read, as every aspiring filmmaker should, Hitchcock Truffaut, where the great French filmmaker and New Vague pioneer interviews the master of suspense at length over a period of years about his entire career. And Hitchcock would talk about how once the movie was storyboarded, the job was over for him. The rest of it was drudgery. The creative part had been completed. And that's the way I feel about it. That at that moment, you're looking at the script and And what can you do with this? And where does that lead you? And how does that translate visually? And when you get into, one of the things I look for are big comedy set pieces. The Parade and Turbo Man, the Bebbles and Bam Bam, rescuing them in the quarry, rescuing Beethoven from the Vivisectionist, Junior destroying his father's wedding in order to save him. Things that require a tremendous amount of planning and execution and detail, and to really map it out shot by shot, which, mind you, sometimes as you get inspired in creating the storyboards, when you get on the set, sometimes you say, I can do better than that, and I can do this. But for instance, in Are We There Yet, I do a thing as one of my lectures where we take the storyboards for a scene and put it shot for shot against the scene in the movie. And the incredible thing was that the storyboards were done well before we had a location and just created out of thin air and held completely, shot by shot, down to the size, really, of the close-ups. Every detail was there, and it was planned in advance, and it was executed. And so that process is, I mean, Hitchcock went to the point where he would have notations of the lens that he wanted to use and the distance the camera would travel. I don't do that. I just trying to get the shot to look like I want it. And Daryl and I, we have constructed almost virtually everything I've done for the past 25 years. And like I said, I mean, often living under the same roof in Vancouver and in Albuquerque in Canada, and living at my house when we had no time for him to go back and forth. But it's been so great. And yes, it gets to be drudgery, but you have to want to go the distance. Like in Rocky, you have to want to finish that and achieve what you envisioned. And that's where, in today's filmmaking, so much is dependent on visual effects, physical effects. And most of my big effects work was done very early in the effects revolution. I remember, in the Flintstones, we had primarily animatronic puppets, but when Dino was seen full body and running and things like that, he was CGI. So there were only 53 CGI shots in the entire movie. And I was very nervous about it because I'd never done one. And I cornered Spielberg in the hall once, and I said, hey, it would be really, really helpful to me if I could just see Jurassic Park, so I know what these things really are supposed to look like. And he said to me, absolutely, you can go on June 8th and see it. Oh, great. And then I realized, I walk away and I go, oh, that was opening day. But more to learn. And today, when you look at Marvel and these DC movies, with these monster finales, with buildings crumbling and hundreds of thousands of things happening, and Aquaman with hundreds of people fighting, and the Star Wars movies attacking the Death Star. That's a whole different business. Today, pre-visualization is a more common tool because it's more fluid. But I prefer storyboarding. And I have not done the Aquaman finale, but close. But you're getting into such bigger collaborations that way, and you're not only servicing your vision, but that of your visual effects producers, supervisors, the artists, and everybody contributes. And you have to be able to assert yourself and maintain your vision, because these guys get today a lot of leeway. And to be very frank, often, although it's lessening, studios like to hire inexperienced directors or people who've just done small independent films to do much larger scale works, in part because they think they can control them and be controlled a little more by those people.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're the captain of the ship, then you have to set the course.
Great words of wisdom. Be the captain of your ship. I like it.
Well, I mean, people have asked, what is the most important quality in being a director? And the answer is be a leader. Be a leader. It's like you sit in a production meeting and let's say you're doing the scene where Turbo Man takes off, flies into the sky, goes crazy, goes up 1,500 feet, drops 800 feet, flies around town, around skyscrapers, goes through a window of a family eating Christmas dinner, smashes against a wall, hits the ground. All right, now they look at you and they say, all right, how are you going to do that? And you should have an answer. And your answer should have a lot of given thought, because I think there's people in the world who say, who turn to the table and say, how are you going to do it? And once you say, I'd like to try this, and what if we do this? Then sometimes people who know best stunt people, physical effects people and all can say, what might work even better is blank. Great, but have a plan and know that people are looking to you for guidance, not just about how to do things, but on the set to be the boss, that to delegate what you need delegated and keep and maintain your position of authority. And I know, and this is why you hear stories, and they're not stories about directors from Eric von Stroheim to what's his name, who you can see on YouTube belittling, Lily Tomlin. That people are sometimes they're maniacs, and that's taking it too far. But you have to run a team the way a quarterback does, and you have to be on top of schedule, and you have to be on top of how long it takes. You are responsible not only for the product, but the manufacturing of the product. And it's a shame, I think, when I see movies that go way over schedule and over budget, and you go, why? I'll give you an example. Just sometimes there's just people don't know. As when Are We There Yet was finishing, they were also putting out a DVD of their film at Revolution, 13 to 30. And I was in someone's office and they had the DVD box that was coming out. And on the back it said, with 13 deleted scenes. I said, 13 deleted scenes? Who shot these scenes that they obviously didn't need? And why? And why? That's like 2 weeks of shooting of stuff that isn't even in the movie. Are We There Yet, by comparison, was, when we assembled it, was 5.5 minutes longer than it was in its final length. And its preview cut was only 30 seconds longer than the final.
Wow.
But that's planning and execution. You're given a budget, and how do you deliver what you want in that budget, in that schedule? And how are you going to do that? And there was a question about I saw that, what is the biggest sacrifice you've had to make as a director? Twice I've made choices to cut out the biggest, most important scenes in movies in order to be able to shoot the rest of the movie the way I wanted to. And that's like the guy who got his arm caught under the rock and had to cut off his arm to get away. That's what it felt like. But nobody else was going to make that decision for me. I wasn't going to say to them, I can't do this. And then they'll say, well, take this, this, and this out. And well, if you do that, you really got problems. But if I take this, I can work around it. And no one would ever know other than us. I remember once when we built the sets for Viva Rock Vegas, beautiful, huge. I mean, we built the strip in in Rock Vegas. And so one of the hotels at the end of the street had dozens of giant crystals coming out of the top. Well, we couldn't afford dozens of giant crystals. We ended up with about 7, I think. And my art director said, when I was mourning the loss of all that, he goes, "No one will ever know the difference, Brian." But making those decisions is tough, because you have to, it's in some that one is extreme. That's like, well, with Siamese twins, you're gonna one will live and one will die, and you have to choose, and you choose. But that's part of what you accept as being in charge. And coming from television, I have more tools and I'm more adept at changing things that I think a lot of people who grew up in features with cushy budgets and things, but it's about maintaining order. And there's always somebody on every project who is somebody, usually works for the studio or somebody they insisted that you hire, who is one of those people who goes around starting fires and is carrying a bucket of water and puts it out so they can take credit for putting out the fire that they started. And you got to battle these people. And it's tough, and you have to be a warrior. And like I said, that's where people get these outsized reputations as monsters. But there's ways to do it, and there's nice ways to do it. And I try to be nice and friendly. But and I always tell people with pre-production, I'm a completely different person than in production. We're all one big team, and then I was like, "What's going on here? Why can't we do this?" But I try to build a team and take a team spirit to approach these things, and working together towards a common goal. And I do everything I can to illuminate what that goal is through storyboards, through meetings, through manipulating the script, through intense discussions, hours and hours of every bit of minutia. Anyways, I think your people are more interested in writing.
No, that was excellent. We did get a fair amount of questions about your process behind directing. And that was incredibly insightful and in-depth answer. And you actually touched on a few questions, which is excellent. One of the plus sides of giving you a copy of the questions in advance. But yeah, what about your advice to writers? We did get a ton of questions, of asking you how you start writing a script. How do you recruit for writing room talent? So there's a couple of questions there about
Sure.
writing that you could.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think the most important thing in starting a script or a project is to give yourself a deadline and stick to it, because Lowell Gans always used to say, writing is like gas in a bottle. It will expand to however much room it has. So make sure that you bottle it and you don't keep expanding. Well, I can do that more. And because and where does it start? I was very lucky that most of my early work was on series that had been established, that the characters were there. And I would say to myself, what do I want to see these people do? What do I want to learn about these people that I don't already know? And that was where so many of my happy days ideas came from. About, for instance, how did Richie and Fonzie meet? Which cued my first year on staff of doing a show, taking them back 5 years and put them back in their first season wardrobe, and walking into Arnold's for the first time and meeting Fonzie and Richie and Fonzie ending up in an alley and a rumble, and Richie changing Fonzie's life forever, and building a friendship. So it just came out of the one line. How did they meet? How did these two characters meet? Other things, the happy days I talked about where I got the staff job, I took something from real life, not my life. I said it was my life. I was lying. It was one of my roommates. When I went to college, they still had silly rules like guys weren't allowed in girls' dorms after 8 p.m. or something. And I had a friend who got locked in overnight. Terrible for him, huh? But it was a great idea to kick off their college careers, and meet the girl who he would eventually marry, and just I remember on Beaver once we were on a one of those brief family vacations, and all of a sudden I was driving the car somewhere in Florida or something, and it hit me like right here. I said, oh my God, I got to come up with 13 episodes for the rest of this year. And I said, what am I going to do? And I had one idea, which I recorded on the back of, I wish I have it somewhere. I kept it because I wrote down off the top of my head 13 notions, and they all became shows. And the first one was a musical. And my mom was a big Broadway person, was always playing West Side Story and Funny Girl and stuff like that. And she dragged us to those things. To see Dick Van Dyke and Bye Bye Birdie, that was pretty good. But one of the guys on staff was the biographer of the Beach Boys. And because of that, I was learning a lot about the Beach Boys. And I thought of a song that Brian Wilson, the leader of the Beach Boys, had written for a band that he wrote and produced called Jan and Dean. And it was called New Girl in School. And so just by saying musical and having that influence in the room and saying, hey, I got it bad for the new girl in school. The guys are flipping, but I'm playing it cool, right? So just out of that, we created a story and about a new girl in school and Beaver's son being attracted to her, and their pursuit of the romance would display itself through musical numbers. And that led me to work with some very talented musicians and to write a song for the first time in my life. What fun was that, to go into somebody's studio with nothing and walk out 2 hours later with a demo of a song, and then to plan it down to, with a choreographer, and how do you schedule this on our limited budget? How do you record it? and how do you rehearse the dance numbers? Well, you hire the people who are going to be in that show the week before, and you put them in the show before so that everybody's around and can learn everything, and record it. And that turned out to be a show that really changed my life, because I won the cable equivalent of the Emmys before they merged cable with TV, and everybody for a period of time there who had won that award ended up doing features. And I followed suit a couple years later, doing Problem Child 2. But that was a challenge, but just a notion, and starting with just what off the top of your head, what's an interesting, what do I want to see these people do that I haven't seen? What do I want to learn new about them? And other than that, when you're talking about a bigger concept, where does it come from? I have one of my few remaining projects it's another musical, an original CGI animated musical that's being in pre-production right now at Illumination, the people who do the Minion movies and stuff. And Pharrell Williams is producing it and doing the music. which I'm thrilled about. We'll see if it ever gets to a theater near you. It takes about 6 or 7 years. So, but how did that come to be? Well, my youngest daughter was ill, and she, for some reason, only wanted to watch these nature documentaries. And I'm watching one about Indian smooth-coated otters who live in family units on the rocky shores of the Ganges River in India. And I'm watching them swim, and how graceful they are. And I went into my office, and on a little tiny Post-it, I wrote, what are they called again? What's the animal called? I can't even remember what the animal's called. I'm trying to get so deep into the story. Otters.
The otters,
okay, so
yes.
Otters, Bollywood musical. That's what I wrote. And it sat there on the front of my computer for 8 years. And then one day I finally did something about it. And I cut together a bunch of video from Bollywood musicals, from nature films of otters and Indian smooth-coated otters, along with Esther Williams, who was an Olympic swimmer, and who made these lavish musicals at MGM in the water, sometimes with hundreds of women in bathing suits diving around her and flames and crazy stuff. And that is how I sold it 12 years later, which is another lesson in perseverance. So you're talking about a period now of 22 years from the initial concept to a point where it is actually coming to fruition. Other things I've done have taken not that long, but sometimes years. And sometimes you spend years on things and they don't go anywhere. And that's a shame, but I think one of the roles in being a writer, the rest of show business, particularly an actor, is to have a thick skin and to be able to take it. I don't take it well. I don't take failure well, and I probably don't take success very well either. But it's hard. It's hard, but you have to learn to accept it and move on to your next idea. And if you believe in something, stay with it. Stay with it like I did with that. I never forgot it. Always felt bad that it didn't do what I wanted to do. And now it may, all those years later. The other thing about writing is I hope people talking about, learning film and stuff are familiar with Chuck Jones, the brilliant animator who is responsible for many of the best Bugs Bunny cartoons made in the 40s and 50s, and did things like The Phantom Tollbooth and How the Grinch Stole Christmas with Dr. Seuss, and a brilliant raconteur, non-parallel, and a really wise and interesting man who spent his very long life doing little more than trying to think like a child every day. And he said the most important thing in being a writer is to respect the impulsive thought, because you can't write just from what you know. You have to rely on what you don't know. And where the inspiration comes from, that is the unsuspected element that you can bring into it. And I think over the years, trying to be funny, trying to write jokes, you kind of learn how to bring things from the back forward a little easier, like improv training does in acting. But you have to be open to it. And it was very hard when I was first starting writing. It was very hard for me to do it. I was terrified. And I knew if I didn't, that I wouldn't be successful. And yet starting was hard. And what I would actually have to do would be to go somewhere where I could be totally check into a hotel, go to Palm Springs, even though I couldn't afford this. But it was just the fact that there would be no one, nothing to distract me. And I was forcing myself to focus and to do what I needed to do. And that's extreme. And finally, when you're working on staff and you're always working around people and you're doing it every day you're writing scenes, you're rewriting, you're working the tables. it does come easier, but still, I worked with professionals who had terrible problems, to the point of there is a writer who became a psychologist, and he only deals with writers having issues in writing. Another friend of mine sought counseling, and they forced him to sit in a room and literally write, anything about yourself. That kind of, speaking of Brian Wilson, who was in that musical, by the way, that he was under heavy psychiatric care, and in order to eat, they would make him write a song to get a hamburger. And it wasn't that bad, but I think that you do need to know structure. I think structure is very, very important in TV, where even on the streaming services, they're still going to black. They're still building to act breaks. It's still inbred in the process that we have to come to a conclusion every 15 minutes, every 10 minutes, whatever the span is, that we have to push the story to another level in order to make sure people come back after the commercial. Now, there's no need for that in streaming, but they're still doing it. And they're still doing it because it's good structure. And most half-hour shows or 2 or 3 acts, sometimes with a cold opening before a little main title. Main titles are dead. I miss main titles. Now it's they don't that shows are much shorter than they used to be. Not so much on streaming, but so they don't have time to do here's a story of a lovely lady for a minute and a half. It was just, and that's how we became the Brady Bunch. And and now on streaming, that skip intro. Okay, so that they don't even care if you watch it anymore. It isn't so much a part of the show or an explanation for the purpose of the show. Let me have a sip here.
Yeah, of course.
Where were we in that now? But knowing the structure, knowing scene structure, how many scenes are there, in a Seinfeld, which they would do a lot of scenes with Big Bang Theory. They do very small stories, very short scenes. And they get Friends where they're always wrapping 2-3 stories in an episode. I would say find a story to tell and see then how do you service the other people in service of that story or creating a secondary one. But focus on what story you want to tell and who you want to tell it about. And this applies to, how do you create characters? How do you create characters that are like, I read a lot of detective fiction. I read very few novels. And, a lot of them I read today, they're about hitmen and thieves. And you still like them, you understand that's their business and they're very professional about it usually. They have codes of conduct and things, but they don't have to be the most lovely people in the world like Richie Cunningham. They can be different and know who you're writing for. I know what my audience is when I'm doing a show, when I'm doing a movie. Who are you writing for? And are you writing for a small audience? Are you writing for a certain segment of the audience? A Gen Z? Whereas most of us, particularly in the streaming world, the programming is becoming very slanted, particularly the long form stuff, towards younger people. So tell stories about write what you know. That's an old axiom too. And when creating characters, how do you do that and how do you express them? And how do you create them? Michael Leeson, who died just a couple of years ago, one of the creators of The Cosby Show, started his career doing things like The Partridge Family, Happy Days, and actually worked for years for James L. Brooks, the creator of Taxi, Mary Tyler Moore Show, Academy Award-winning feature director. And he told me a story about once he was standing on Ventura Boulevard and he saw a guy drive by in an old Cadillac convertible with golf clubs sticking out of the back seat. And out of that, he created a character of a gambler, a guy who hustles people on the golf course, who, and is in his small world, and an interesting character. And he sold it. It didn't get made, I don't believe, but somebody that he saw for 2 seconds, 3 seconds driving by in a car, and he imagined what their life would be. And I always teach people, who's in your life that you know, and how do you describe them? So many great TV characters came from real people. Kramer on Seinfeld, Eddie Haskell on Leave It to Beaver, came from real people. And so plumb your own experience as well. And if you're writing sci-fi and stuff, great. But who are those characters? Look what mileage George Lucas got by thinking about combining Westerns really with the science fiction model, and taking a cowboy like Harrison Ford instead of a daunting hero like Flash Gordon was. And I don't know. I think we've talked enough about this, have we?
I thought that was excellent. And yeah.
Oh, you think everything's good. All right.
I can't help it. You're a great speaker. You're so well-spoken and eloquent.
I'm loquacious. We know that. Nothing else.
No, I thought it was excellent. And yeah, that is often advice that I hear when talking about writing is, your perception of the world is unique to you. So you should use that to your advantage.
That's what people are looking for. When writers go into networks, particularly with half-hour shows, they say, what's your connection to the material? What does it mean to you? And that's why you have so many autobiographical shows. Black is F, which is the contemporary version of the Dick Van Dyke Show. It's Keisha Barris, who created Blackish, his version of his, 5 kids, and being a high-powered Black comedy writer in Hollywood today. You got Everybody Hates Chris. Larry David, another comedy writer, the real life of a comedy writer. The Goldbergs, now in its 9th season, is literally taken from Adam Goldberg's home videos as a kid. The stories, the characters, the things that he chronicled are recreated in the show. And going back to Carl Reiner, Better Things on FX with Pamela, starring Pamela Alden. Bill Burr's show, F is for Family, is his family in the 70s. An animated show. But once again, when you get into these things, the most personal things are often the most universal. Mm-hmm. And as Pamela Alden once said, the detail is in real life. So, and people always ask, how do you make your characters sound real? Well, don't make them sound like they're characters. Make them sound like the conversational. Some of my students, they just turned in a couple scenes where every speech was, I got to get my hands in there. Well, too long. How's that? And that's not the way people talk, right? They talk in short, except to me today. But listen to conversation. And yes, there's nothing wrong with being witty and succinct and having answers for everything. But sound like what you hear. Sound conversational, but make it personal,
Yeah, your audience has to relate.
Well, if they can't, you're in the wrong business.
Absolutely.
But that raises another thing here, though. That one of the questions was, correct me if I'm saying this right. Now I can't remember. Oh, well, moving on.
No, it's okay.
No, I wish I had it there for a second, but I'm trying to think of a lot of things at once here. I apologize.
There were a lot of questions submitted, so that's understandable. Well, I think we're about 15 minutes out from the webinar finishing up. So I'm going to switch the topic of conversation up a little bit to talk about some accessibility to the industry, pitching, and funding. because we did receive quite a number of questions from around the world,
Right.
asking how to make it in the industry while living in geographic locations or places where accessibility to support is limited. I know Africa and Colombia were two of the locations that were noted in quite a number of questions. So I'm just wondering if you have any advice for these folks.
Yes, that number one, you needn't be dependent on movie studios, TV networks and stuff. You have the power in your little iPhone to shoot, edit, score, and release any content that you create, which is one of the lessons I learned from Jerry Marshall was don't just be one thing. He was told, don't just be a writer. And he was an actor, a musician, an athlete, a producer, a director. And I mean, he was, voices, and he's the father in Chicken Little for Disney. he would always, he was an actor. I believe he might have even been nominated for an Emmy on Murphy Brown as the network head. He did movies for Albert Brooks and all kinds of people, but then he always just played himself. but the message was control your own work, learn how to edit, learn how to write, learn how to learn how to use the camera, learn how to edit. You have everything on your computer to make a movie, except the kid that I have in an editing room, except the kid who brings you lunch, because you're not going out for 6 months, trust me. But you have those tools, and you can make short projects, you can make documentary projects, you can build, you have the means to release them and find an audience. Now, there are so many examples today of people who started by posting material online, on TikTok, on Vimeo, on YouTube, who have gone on to huge things. Issa Rae started doing independently financed videos called Awkward Black Girl, just chronicling awkward moments in her life, like meeting up with a coworker at a stop sign and having nothing to say, and from that, she launched now in its fourth or fifth final season of a show she stars in and executive produces, and is starred in movies and long form streaming projects, and has other show producing the Black Women's Comedy Sketch Show and has a commitment for another series on HBO. And where did it start? I have friends, I told this story last time, Rick Kopp, a terrific writer. Him and two friends, they decided to make a gay murder mystery, sort of a bit Scooby-Doo-ish, and it was called Where the Bears Are. They bought a camera for $25,000. No, I'm sorry, for $5,000, and made a feature-length film for $25,000, and they released it first in 6-minute chunks on the internet, on Vimeo, for free. And then they started selling merchandise. And when they had the whole thing, they put it together. They sold off the DVD rights. They sold it to cable. They sold it internationally. And they grossed on that $25,000 investment. They found an audience. They knew what that audience was. They found a way to tap into it. They grossed over $800,000 on that venture and made 2 very successful financially features from it. So these are examples, but you see people who become influential, you see things that gain traction, and Hollywood is looking for new. They are looking for they have scouts scouring the internet, looking for new talent, looking for new voices. And today, I think today there is finally an emphasis being put on hearing voices that haven't been heard. Native American shows are showing up, so many more opportunities for filmmakers of color, for females. for artists of all stripes, and it's a great opportunity for people to be heard, because people are asking to hear what they have to say, and give a platform for people with unique visions and new things to say to audiences. Now, working particularly in Africa, I was very happy to see that you had all that penetration there, that people don't have access to everything, but at the same time, I made a film in South Africa, in Cape Town, one of the great experiences of my life. And the first time I turned on the TV, it was American Idol, except it was African Idol. and I realized right then that there is a lot of television production all across this continent, and it is growing. And that Cape Town is a production center. Johannesburg is a production center. There are others spread throughout the continent. A woman who was our production coordinator on the film I made in South Africa was from the tribe, if you've ever seen The Gods Must Be Crazy, where their language is like sounds, not words. And when she was like 14, 15 years old, someone came to their village, set up a projector in the back of the truck, hung a sheet, and showed a movie. And she decided that she was going to be in the movie business. And so she, like a week later, without shoes, began to walk to Johannesburg to start a life and build a career in something she knew nothing about, except for what she had seen on that sheet in one night, and was successful. For instance, Cape Town is the largest commercial production facility in the world. Why? Primarily because it's a great place, and European companies can shoot their summer stuff where the seasons are reversed, like Australia, rather than in the snow in Germany. This exists in many places, and there's places to start. Very few people start the way I did as a writer today. People need to learn before, there's that old expression, you need to walk before you could run. Acquire as much knowledge as you can before you're in a situation, a make or break situation like I was, that we discussed. And only by the mercy of somebody said, let's let him learn something so he does better. Otherwise, that would have been the end of my career. But had I been a writer's assistant working on a show, which is a very popular way to go, had I been an assistant editor and watching things come together and learn that way, I might have had more tools at my disposal than when I was given my first opportunity to write a half-hour show. And I believe in paying your dues. I believe in learning. I believe in going and being an unpaid intern and PAs on projects. I believe in trying to sign on independent films. And when you're talking about making your own thing, and maybe you can raise enough money to make a short, where do you get people? Put out a thing on Craigslist. Anywhere, people want to work. People want to collaborate. People want to do this. You want to do this. Find others who share that passion and that drive, and take advantage of them. Have them work in service of your ideas, and in return, maybe you can help them when they ring the bell. But the industry is very much built on mentoring relationships. I have had many over the years, and I do so because people did so for me. And there isn't anyone in the entertainment business who did not have someone who gave them a hand, gave them a leg up, imparted knowledge or opportunity to learn. And it's a tradition, and it's very true. And it's like, and people say, well, how do I even get in the room? I was like, Who's writing the writers? You see a show that you love what that you saw, and you see someone's name, call up the show, find their age, get their email. You can do it. Write them. Tell them, would you read something? Can I ask you about how you did it? You know, and people share. Trust me, most writers would be so flattered that somebody actually recognized their name besides their parents. That they'd be happy. They'll give you their right arm. But you know, and you know, then you know, okay, so let's say that you got an independent film. Okay, so what's the odds on getting distribution? Let's look at it. Sundance. Everybody thinks Sundance. Ever since Steven Soderbergh broke through a Sex Lies videotape, which was made for 50th Julia Roberts, all these young stars, and it grossed $27 million, and a whole new industry was born out of that. And today, 28 films were selected last year for Sundance. They had, including foreign submissions, over 4,500, I think. So there are many other places that you can get your work seen. There are hundreds of film festivals, including things, ones made just with iPhones, Festival for iPhones. There are all different kinds of festivals, different subject matter, documentary film, shorts, all kinds of ways to get attention and to get your product out there and to have your work be seen. Mm-hmm. And it's a hard path. But if you're dedicated, if that's what you really want, then you'll do it. And it doesn't mean, that if you do something else within the business that you're giving up on what you really want. And if you're persistent, hopefully you will get the opportunity, but it's not guaranteed. But no, there are so many ways that you can take your avocation and find an outlet. I always use the example, a couple of years ago, I almost got a partial knee replacement to go with my fake hips. And on the doctor's website was this 8-minute film on the operation. And when I tell you they spent $2 million on this, it was beautifully scored, it was beautifully photographed, the acting was good, the CGI stuff of the surgery itself was intricate and well done, and not inexpensive. Good music, it was a great package. And so somebody made that, somebody directed that, somebody wrote it, somebody designed the sets, somebody cast the actors, somebody edited it, somebody scored it. And once again, it's a way to use your talent. There is so much multimedia out there today that every business, every enterprise is becoming more and more reliant on it. And they are becoming more and more reliant on people who know how to tell their story for them. And, Robert Altman, who we were talking about earlier, spent most of his career doing industrial films in Kansas City before he ever came to Hollywood and started doing things like Bonanza. So know that you may not be a major Hollywood director, but that you can write, direct, cut, score, do films, do things that you can be proud of without having 12 million people as an audience. Sometimes you can be very satisfied with finding an audience who really appreciates it. And what is your goal? Is your goal just to make money or to live a creative life? If your goal is to live a creative life, then don't abandon it. Find ways to do so, or else you're going to live a life of disappointment in some respect if you don't follow through. And if you say that's enough, I need to do this to put bread on the table, great. But find a way to express yourself. There are many, many today. Take photographs, write poems.
That's great. That's such great advice. I love that. And it's true. If you want to do something and you don't, you always kind of will be a little bit like, what if I did this? So we are at the time, Brian, but I do have a couple more questions if you
Please,
want
please
to.
fire away. We're here.
Yeah. So
It's not like we're going into overtime.
Not yet. But yeah, so I thought, we did touch on it a little bit while you were answering the previous question, but I thought a great way to end the webinar would be to talk about the industry in general. There were a couple of questions submitted about asking what the reliability of work in the film industry is right now. And a follow-up to that, how different is Hollywood now than it was when you had started being a part of the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So what was the first one again? Let's start with that.
Okay, the reliability of work.
Reliability of work. Okay, let's go by this. When I joined the Writers Guild in 1976, there were 1,800 members. Today, there are over 10,000. According to my friend David Goodman, who just ended 2 terms as the president of the Writers Guild, 60% make the 30,000 a year that is necessary to trigger your health insurance for another 18 months. Did you lose me, Nicole?
No, I can still see you.
Okay,
can you see me?
You went to a still. Okay, never mind.
Okay.
So what does that mean? That means that 4,000 people, many of them older, part-time, or people like me who primarily became directors and write less frequently, don't qualify. But there are also, when I started, there were 3 networks: ABC, NBC, CBS. Then there was Fox and the CW. And then there was HBO, Showtime, Cinemax, and all the rest of them. And now you have a huge number of streaming services. And so prime time in my day ran for 3 hours, 7 nights a week, times 3 networks. So it is 60 hours a week. Well, now you have over 400 scripted series alone in production domestically for the marketplace. So there are a lot more opportunities, but at the same time, there's more people fighting for those jobs. But the good news is they aren't looking for me, whose big hits, were a quarter of a century ago. They want people with new ideas, and today they're more open than they have ever been to ideas. Who was the girl we were talking about who just won the Emmy for HBO series?
Michaela Cole.
Michaela Cole. So here's a Black woman in England who never had done anything and ended up producing and writing and starring in a limited series on HBO, and just won the Emmy. So 10 years ago, would this woman have made it past HR for a job in the office? Maybe not. And today, she was given an opportunity to share her vision with the world and found a responsive, huge audience for that. So, people do break through, and that didn't matter who you were or are. And I know it's hard to get in the room. It's hard to get in the room. And once you get in the room, you better be prepared, and you better be ready and know how to pitch, and know how to sell yourself. And you can't be shy. William Goldman, who I saw quoted at the beginning, the Academy Award winning writer from my hometown, said the proper attitude for a writer, let me see if I get this right, is confident but self-deprecating. meaning don't be too serious about yourself, but but show them that you believe in it, that you see it, and help them to see what you see. And that goes a long way. And you have to inspire confidence. And the only way you're going to inspire confidence is by being confident. And because people are entrusting you with their with their jobs when they hire you. If you fail, it's a bad reflection on them. So that's why it's hard. And that's why there's all these catch-22s. Oh, you got to be a member of the guild to get a job, but you can't get a job unless you got an agent, and you can't get an agent without having sold anything. So agents, again, young agents particularly want to develop new talent. And if you can figure out who the young agents are, or a couple of those agencies, the guys who were on my agent's desk are now, one's a huge producer and the other one runs the agency today. So, you know, and that's a quarter of a century. You know, but people start in places and they earn opportunities. And so people in those positions, they're looking to nurture talent of their own that they can build and help their own careers. And if you can find them, they have what's called a hip pocket client. You're not officially a client, but maybe they'll show something if they see a hole somewhere and say, you got anything new? I want somebody I've never heard of. Well, in their hip pocket, they got your script, they got you. And so try and reach out to people, and don't be shy. It's not coming to you. No, you know, they don't know you're out there. Make some noise, make a show, put it out there. You know, put yourself out there, get in a position to learn, to be around the people who make decisions. And hopefully they'll make one that includes you.
Make your presence known.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know how, you know, no one's going to reach out to you in your living room in Boca Raton and say, hey, you want to do a show?
You have to be like, I want to do a show.
I really want to do a show, and it's great, and you're going to love it. And so are millions of people. See, that's a difference.
Excellent. Be passionate, be excited.
Why not? If you're excited about this, show it. Share your passion. People respect passion. They do. It's one of the few things they respect universally.
Great words of advice. I think with that, we will start to end the session, Brian. There are so many questions left unanswered. I feel like we'll have to do another Ask Me Anything in 6 months to address all of the follow-up questions that we got today. Thank you so much, Brian, for your time and answering so many questions today. I know we didn't get to have a community question period, but next time, maybe we'll just take all of the submitted questions from this webinar and use those. We'll have a bucket of questions per session.
I wish I could answer everyone's concerns, and I try and touch on things that people can do to help themselves. And, you know, use Celtx, learn the format. Make sure your spelling's good. Make sure your format's good, because when people do read a script, if they see mistakes, simple mistakes in format and spelling, and punctuation, these are professionals, you know, and for the most part, very educated people, overeducated people. and you know, when they see something that doesn't fit, it distracts from reading the script. It really does. It takes you out of the characters and the flow, and it puts you into being an editor. And that, you don't want that. You really don't. You don't want to draw attention to the wrong things. You want to sell your characters, your story.
Brian, we need to get you a podcast. I really do feel you have so much inspiration and wisdom and advice to impart. I hope everybody found this session as useful and as intriguing to listen to as I have. Thank you, Brian, so much. I can't wait to have another Ask Me Anything session with you because it definitely has to happen again.
Right.
And I also wanted to take a moment to thank everyone who participated today.
Oh, yes. Thank you all for coming. This shows initiative.
Absolutely.
These are people who want to succeed, who want to be part of a community of artists. And way to go the extra mile. It's exactly what we're talking about, because there's many thousands of people with the same ambitions who didn't take the time even to do this. So good job.
Well done. This was all for you also. And thank you so much for, submitting questions in advance. So many insightful questions. We're always so happy to hear from everybody. We hope you come to the next one. We will be releasing some more info on upcoming sessions with different topics, in the coming months on our social media channels, as well as via email. So if you want to subscribe and get notified anytime we have an industry series webinar, just reach out to our support team and they'll be able to hook you up. So on that note, I am going to go ahead.
One more thing.
Okay, yeah, no, of course.
If people want, they can follow me on Instagram at Brian Levant and see all my toys. And also they'll get information on, if they should desire, to order my life and toys coming in 2022. All right. Thank you all again. Been a pleasure. Thank you, Nicole. Good job.
Oh, thanks, Brian.
Thanks
go follow Brian on Instagram. Order his book. It's going to be fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. Huge thanks again to Brian, and we'll see you all next time.
Signing off.
Bye, everybody.